Tourist drenched a royal guard for fun. The guard's severe reply left onlookers silent, emotional st. The morning sun shone brightly over the grand palace, making its golden spires gleam like they had been touched by magic. Visitors from all over the world crowded the open courtyards, their faces filled with excitement and curiosity. Some moved in groups, chatting and laughing as they pointed at the ancient architecture and intricate carvings on the palace walls. Others wandered alone, taking in the grandeur at their own pace. Cameras clicked constantly, phones were raised to capture selfies with the majestic building in the background, and a few children ran about, their laughter ringing across the stone pathways. Among the tourists was a young man named Liam, visiting from another country. He was full of energy and loved capturing moments on video to share with his friends. He had always been fascinated by stories of royalty and tradition, and this palace had long been on his travel list. Liam had read countless articles about the royal guards, men and women who stood perfectly still for hours, their uniforms immaculate, their expressions unchanging. He found the idea fascinating, almost magical, and he was eager to see it for himself. As he walked through the palace grounds, Liam noticed how the visitors treated the guards with a mixture of awe and curiosity. The guards stood at their posts near the main entrance, unmoving despite the crowd around them. Their uniforms were pristine, with bright colors that stood out against the gray stone of the palace. Their hats, tall and imposing, made them seem taller than they already were. Every detail of their appearance was perfect, from the polished shoes to the crisp folds of their jackets. Liam felt a strange mix of admiration and curiosity. These were people who devoted themselves to their duty with such precision and patience, yet they seemed almost like living statues. Liam's eyes moved over the crowd, noticing how everyone behaved differently around the guards. Some tourists whispered to each other, afraid to disturb the silence. Others snapped photos from a respectful distance. And then there were a few who, like him, seemed fascinated by the unusual calmness of the guards, leaning in to get a better view, trying to figure out how they could stand so still for so long. He walked closer to the main gate, where two guards were posted on either side. Their faces were serious, their eyes forward, their hands resting on ceremonial swords. Every movement they made was deliberate and controlled. Liam admired their dedication. He thought about how difficult it must be to remain so focused under the gaze of hundreds of people, all moving, talking, and taking photos around them. The guards didn't flinch, didn't react to sudden noises, and didn't break character even when small children ran by giggling. Liam couldn't help but notice the expressions on the visitors' faces. Some were amazed, their mouths slightly open as they watched the guards stand motionless. Others were taking photos, trying to capture the perfect shot. There were also those who seemed slightly nervous, unsure of how close they could get without causing trouble. Liam felt a sense of excitement building inside him. He wanted to experience this world himself, to see what it felt like to be close to such dedication and tradition. He moved along the edge of the courtyard, careful to stay out of the way of the larger groups. He noticed the way the sunlight reflected off the polished shoes of the guards, creating tiny flashes of light on the stone floor. The shadows cast by their tall hats seemed to stretch across the ground, giving them an even more imposing presence. Every detail, he realized, was part of a long tradition that had been preserved for generations. These guards were not just people in uniforms. They were living symbols of history, discipline, and respect. As he walked, Liam thought about how different this scene was from anything he had seen before. In his hometown, security personnel might look serious, but they were not figures of fascination. Here, every step, every gesture of the guards carried meaning. The tourists themselves seemed to understand this, moving with a certain quietness that Liam had never experienced before. Even the air felt different, charged with the weight of history, and the presence of something greater than the crowd itself. Liam's curiosity continued to grow. He observed a guard near a large arched doorway, standing perfectly still despite a group of children running nearby. One of the children tried to get the guard's attention, waving excitedly, but the guard remained focused, his posture unchanged. Liam was impressed. He wondered how someone could maintain such concentration and patience. It was almost as if the guard was part of the palace itself, blending with the stone walls and golden accents. While Liam continued to watch, he noticed a small group of tourists whispering to each other, pointing at the guards with wide eyes. They seemed almost hesitant to move, as though the presence of the guards demanded respect. Liam realized that this was part of the experience. Seeing these men and women in their uniforms was not just about photography or entertainment. It was about witnessing a tradition that had survived centuries. He felt a sense of awe, mixed with excitement, as he thought about being part of this moment, even if only as a visitor passing through. He found a spot near a low stone railing, giving him a clear view of the main courtyard. From here he could see the guards in full view, their expressions unreadable, their movements minimal and precise. Tourists moved around him, but he focused on the guards, studying their posture, the way they held their hands, and the tiny, careful adjustments they made to remain steady. Each small detail seemed deliberate, a silent signal of discipline and commitment. Liam's mind wandered to the stories he had read about the royal family and the history of the palace. He imagined the ceremonies, the parades, and the centuries of tradition that these guards had witnessed. Every stone in the courtyard seemed to hold a story, every archway a memory. He felt as if he had stepped into another time where respect and decorum were more than just words, they were a way of life. As the morning passed, Liam continued to observe. He noticed the way the sunlight shifted across the courtyard, highlighting different parts of the guards' uniforms. The bright reds, deep blues, and gold accents shimmered in the light, making them appear almost regal. The crowds around them moved like a river, but the guards remained like unmovable rocks, a steady presence in the flowing chaos. Liam felt a mixture of admiration and curiosity. How could someone stand so still and remain so focused? How did they manage the long hours of duty without showing fatigue or distraction? Even as other tourists began to eat snacks, chat loudly, or move quickly from one point to another, Liam stayed in his spot, captivated. He took a few photos but mostly just watched, wanting to memorize the scene in his mind. He felt as if he were witnessing something rare, a glimpse of dedication and tradition that few people truly understood. Every movement, or lack of movement, told a story. By the time Liam had spent nearly an hour in the courtyard, he realized that he had become completely absorbed in the scene. The guards' calmness, the history of the palace, the curious whispers of the tourists, all of it had created an atmosphere he would never forget. He felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement about what might happen next. Little did he know that soon, his playful curiosity would lead him into a situation that tested his understanding of respect, tradition, and self-control, changing the way he viewed these guards forever. Liam wandered a little further into the palace grounds, his curiosity growing stronger with each step. The grandeur of the palace still held him in awe, but now his attention had shifted almost entirely to the guards. He noticed one guard standing slightly apart from the others, near a side gate that led to the royal gardens. This guard's posture was just as perfect, his expression calm and serious, yet something about him caught Liam's eye more than the others. Perhaps it was the way he seemed completely unaffected by the constant movements and noises around him. Liam's mind buzzed with ideas. He thought about the videos he could make for his social media, light-hearted clips that would get laughs and attention. In his excitement, he imagined pretending to do something playful with the guards, capturing their serious expressions and sharing it with friends. It felt harmless in his mind, just a little joke. After all, everyone else seemed so calm, and the guard appeared untouchable, almost like a statue. The thought gave him a mischievous smile. He glanced around quickly to make sure no one was watching too closely. Most tourists were absorbed in their own tour, taking photos or chatting quietly. Liam's heartbeat quickened. He slowly approached the guard near the side gate, careful not to step on the stone edges or make too much noise. As he got closer, he could see the sharp lines of the guard's uniform and the polished boots that reflected the morning sunlight. Liam admired the attention to detail, each crease, each shine, each movement controlled perfectly. A small grin spread across Liam's face as he picked up a water bottle from his bag. It was a warm day, and he had brought it to stay hydrated, but now it had a new, mischievous purpose in his mind. He shook it slightly, pretending to be casual as he moved closer to the guard. He thought of how funny it would look if he could get just a tiny splash of water on the uniform, capturing the moment on camera without hurting anyone. It seemed innocent to him, just a joke, a prank. As he raised the bottle, he noticed the crowd of tourists nearby. Some were still whispering among themselves, while others were snapping photos or pointing out small details of the palace. Liam thought to himself that no one would see it clearly enough to realize what he had done, except perhaps for the guard. He laughed quietly to himself, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The thrill of doing something daring made his heart race. The guard remained motionless, completely focused on his post, unaware, or so Liam thought, of the young man approaching. Every muscle in the guard's body was controlled, his stance steady, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Liam was struck again by the discipline required to remain like that for so long. Yet in that moment, the desire to play a little prank seemed stronger than his respect for the guard. Liam took a deep breath and decided to go ahead. He tilted the bottle slightly and poured a small stream of water toward the guard. Time seemed to slow down as the liquid left the bottle, sparkling in the sunlight before hitting its target. The water splashed onto the guard's uniform, making a faint hissing sound as it soaked into the fabric. For a brief moment, Liam froze, expecting some kind of reaction, a laugh, a frown, maybe even a shout, but the guard did not move. Liam blinked in surprise. The guard's expression remained unchanged. He was still standing perfectly straight, his eyes focused, his hands resting calmly at his sides. Liam's grin faltered, replaced by a sudden nervousness. The guard's silence was not a sign of amusement. It carried weight, authority, and control. Liam realized that this was no ordinary security officer. This was someone who had trained for years to maintain composure under any circumstance. The tourists around them noticed the movement. Some gasped quietly, covering their mouths in shock. Others froze mid-step, unsure what to do. The children who had been playing nearby stopped suddenly, sensing the tension in the air. The lively atmosphere of the palace grounds shifted in an instant, replaced by a heavy, watchful silence. Liam's heart pounded as he realized he might have crossed an invisible line. The guard took one step forward, each movement deliberate and calm. Liam could feel the authority radiating from him, a quiet but undeniable presence that made the crowd part slightly to give him space. The young tourist's excitement turned into apprehension as he noticed the guard's eyes, sharp and focused, locking onto him. It was not anger that Liam saw, but an intense seriousness that demanded respect. Liam's mind raced. He had never been in a situation where a single glance could make him feel so small and vulnerable. The laughter he had imagined vanished completely. He wanted to apologize, to explain that it was only meant as a joke, but the words caught in his throat. The guard's silent command filled the space around them, leaving no room for excuses or casual remarks. The crowd remained still, holding its breath. Some whispered to each other, trying not to disturb the tension. It was as if time itself had slowed down in the presence of the guard's quiet authority. Liam felt exposed, as though everyone could see into his thoughts, his intentions, and his mistake. The fun he had imagined seemed foolish now, replaced by a deep respect for the man who stood before him. Finally, the guard spoke. His voice was calm, steady, and clear, carrying across the courtyard without a hint of anger. He addressed Liam directly, explaining that such behavior was not appropriate in a place of tradition and respect. The words were firm but measured, giving Liam a chance to understand the seriousness of the situation without humiliating him publicly. The tone was strict, yet not cruel, an important lesson wrapped in quiet authority. Liam's face turned red as he listened. The reality of what he had done sank in. He realized how thoughtless his action had been, how it disrupted the dignity of the palace and the discipline of the guards. He looked around and saw the faces of the other tourists, some staring with surprise, others nodding in approval of the guards' composed response. He felt a wave of embarrassment, realizing that what had seemed like a harmless prank was, in truth, a breach of respect. Slowly, Liam nodded, stammering an apology. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper, unsure if he could find the right words to make up for what he had done. The guard listened without interruption, his eyes still steady, his presence commanding. There was no immediate judgment, no anger, just a reminder that actions have consequences, especially in places that carry history and tradition. The tourists around them relaxed slightly as the tension eased. Some returned to their tour, others whispered quietly about what had just happened. The children resumed their play, though more cautiously, perhaps having learned an unspoken lesson about respect. Liam felt a mixture of relief and shame, understanding that this experience would stay with him far longer than any joke or video could. As the guard returned to his original post, Liam stepped back, feeling the weight of the moment. He watched the man resume his still stance, his expression calm, his posture perfect. The authority and discipline were still there, unbroken by the interruption, reinforcing the importance of dedication and respect in a way that words alone could not convey. Liam realized that he had learned something important that day, something about patience, responsibility, and the power of quiet authority. He thought about the centuries of tradition that the guard represented, the countless hours of training, and the lives dedicated to maintaining a symbol of pride and honor. His playful intent had collided with a real-world lesson in humility, leaving a mark on him that he would carry for the rest of his life. The crowd slowly resumed its activity, but Liam stayed a little longer, watching the guard. He noticed the small details again, the way the uniform stayed perfect, the precise posture, the unwavering gaze. This time, however, he looked not for a chance to joke or create a video, but to understand and appreciate. He felt a newfound respect for the discipline and history embodied in the guard's presence, realizing that some traditions are meant to be honored, not played with. Liam finally turned to leave the courtyard, his steps slower than before, his mind still replaying the scene. He knew he would tell the story to his friends, but not as a funny prank. Instead, he would share the lesson he had learned about respect, tradition, and the power of quiet authority. That day at the palace had changed something inside him, an awareness that some actions, even seemingly harmless ones, carry consequences far greater than expected. Liam could feel his heart still racing as he stepped back, unsure how to act. The guard remained in his place, silent, unwavering, yet his presence seemed to fill the entire courtyard. The crowd had returned to their activities, though a quiet buzz lingered in the air. Everyone around was whispering to themselves or to friends, replaying the incident in their minds. Some glanced at Liam with curiosity, sensing the awkwardness he felt. The weight of the situation had settled on him, heavier than he had anticipated. For the first time, Liam truly saw the guard, not just as a figure in a uniform, but as a person with a responsibility that transcended his own understanding. The man's calm, measured stance spoke volumes about discipline, training, and respect. Liam felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. He had never experienced authority in such a quiet but powerful form. It was different from the loud reprimands or confrontations he had encountered in his life. This was a lesson taught through presence, through silence, and through the subtle power of composure. The guard's eyes finally moved toward Liam again, steady and unwavering. There was no anger in them, yet they carried a firmness that made Liam instinctively straighten his posture. The young tourist realized that the man was watching him carefully, measuring his reaction, and waiting to see if he would acknowledge the mistake properly. Liam's palms felt sweaty and his mouth went dry. He wanted to apologize, but words seemed insufficient to capture the depth of his embarrassment and newfound respect. After a tense pause, the guard took a slow, deliberate step forward. His boots clicked softly against the stone courtyard, a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet morning. The crowd instinctively gave him space, their movements slowing as if in respect for the gravity of the moment. Liam's heart thumped loudly in his chest. He had never seen anyone command attention so effortlessly, simply by being present and composed. The guard spoke, his voice calm, clear, and authoritative, yet not harsh. "Sir," he said, "this palace represents centuries of history, tradition, and pride. Every person who stands here, every visitor who walks these grounds, is part of a story that must be respected. Actions such as yours disrupt not only the discipline of the guards but the dignity of this place." Liam swallowed hard. The words cut through the nervous energy he felt, but they were not cruel. They were firm, logical, and full of purpose. The guard was teaching, not punishing. Liam understood immediately that this was a moment for reflection, not for excuses or laughter. The realization sank into him with a clarity he could not ignore. He had acted without thinking, and now he was confronted with the consequences, not in anger but in quiet authority. The guard continued, his tone unwavering. "We serve here not for ourselves, but to represent respect, honor, and dedication. Standing still, observing and maintaining focus is not merely a task, it is a responsibility. It demands patience, commitment, and awareness at all times. Every action here matters, whether it is small or large." The crowd was silent, watching intently. Tourists who had been busy taking selfies or chatting quietly paused, sensing the gravity of the moment. Even the children who had been playing earlier seemed to notice the seriousness of the situation. Liam felt a wave of humility wash over him. He realized that he had underestimated not only the role of the guard, but also the weight of history and tradition that the palace embodied. "I apologize," Liam said, his voice small and sincere. "I didn't mean to disrespect you or the palace. It was meant as a joke, but I understand now that it was wrong." The guard nodded slightly, his expression softening, but his gaze remained steady. "Acknowledgement of your mistake is the first step," he replied. "Understanding why it matters is the second. A joke may seem harmless to one person, but it can carry consequences you might not expect. Respect must always guide your actions, especially in places where tradition and history are preserved." Liam's hands trembled slightly as he listened. He thought about the water he had splashed, how small it had seemed at the time, and how much weight it had carried in reality. The guard had not reacted with anger, yet the authority in his calm demeanor had made the lesson clear. Liam realized that true discipline was not about shouting or punishing, but about standing firm and teaching through presence. The guard stepped back to his original position, resuming the perfect stance he had maintained before the incident. Liam noticed the subtle way he adjusted his posture, the careful placement of his hands, and the quiet dignity in his expression. It was almost as if nothing had happened, yet the lesson remained. Liam felt a mix of relief and lingering awe. He had been confronted not with anger, but with something far more powerful, silent authority and respect. The tourists around him began to move again, slowly returning to their tour, but whispers of the incident lingered. Some spoke quietly to each other, remarking on the guard's composure and the way he handled the situation. Others discussed Liam's actions, some with amusement, some with a sense of approval for how seriously the guard responded. Liam felt the weight of their eyes but chose not to meet them. Instead, he focused on the lesson he had learned, allowing it to sink in fully. He thought about how easily he could have dismissed the guard's role as mere formality, but now he saw it differently. The uniform, the stance, the unwavering focus, it was more than appearances. It was a symbol of discipline, of centuries of history, and of the responsibility to uphold respect in a space that held deep cultural significance. Liam realized that every guard standing at their post carried not only their own personal discipline, but also the weight of the traditions they represented. For the first time, Liam understood that respect was not just a word or a feeling, it was a practice. It required awareness, patience, and humility. He had approached the guard with playfulness and mischief, thinking it would be harmless fun, but he had learned that even small actions could carry meaning far beyond what he intended. The guard's calm, composed response had turned a moment of potential embarrassment into a lesson in character and respect. Liam looked around the courtyard once more, noticing details he had overlooked before. The stone pathways, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, the carved archways that told stories of the past, and the gleaming uniforms of the guards, all of it now seemed connected in a way he had never realized. The palace was more than a building. It was a living history, and the guards were the living symbols of its endurance and pride. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of humility and gratitude. He realized that he would carry this lesson with him long after leaving the palace. The memory of the guard's calm authority, the weight of his words, and the silent command of his presence would remain with him, shaping how he approached respect and responsibility in the future. As Liam began to walk away, he noticed the guard's eyes follow him, still steady and attentive. It was not a gaze of anger or judgment, but one of quiet awareness, a reminder that every action matters and that respect must always guide behavior, especially in places of tradition and history. Liam nodded slightly to himself, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson he had received. Even as the crowd resumed its normal activities, the atmosphere had subtly changed. Tourists moved more quietly, speaking in softer tones, and children played with a little more caution. Liam felt the same shift within himself. He realized that humor and fun have their place, but so do respect and understanding, especially when interacting with traditions and people who represent values larger than oneself. Liam continued to walk through the courtyard, reflecting on what had just happened. The guard remained at his post, steadfast and composed, a figure of quiet authority. Liam understood that this encounter, brief as it had been, was more than a lesson in manners. It was a lesson in perspective. He now saw that some actions, no matter how small, could affect the environment, the people around him, and the dignity of the place itself. By the time Liam left the main courtyard, he felt changed. The excitement and mischievous energy that had driven him moments before were replaced by a sense of respect, thoughtfulness, and humility. He knew he would never forget the calm, unwavering presence of the guard, and the way one person's quiet authority could command attention, teach a lesson, and leave a lasting impression. That day, Liam learned a truth that could not be taught through words alone. It was a lesson felt in the heart, understood in the mind, and carried forward in action. The palace, the guards, and the traditions they upheld had shown him the power of respect, discipline, and quiet authority, a lesson far more meaningful than any joke, video, or fleeting moment of amusement. Liam walked slowly through the courtyard, still feeling the weight of the lesson he had received from the guard. Each step seemed heavier, not because of fatigue, but because of the realization of how thoughtless his actions had been. What had started as a playful, mischievous impulse had turned into a moment of deep self-reflection. He understood now that the palace was more than just a tourist attraction, and the guards were more than just ceremonial figures. They were the living embodiment of history, tradition, and discipline. As he moved past the other tourists, Liam noticed how differently everyone was behaving. Some people whispered quietly to each other, as if the earlier incident had reminded them to respect the space they were in. Children played cautiously, their laughter softer, more controlled, yet still joyful. Parents gently guided their kids, explaining that this place required careful behavior. Even the chatter of groups slowed, replaced by a quiet reverence that Liam had not noticed before the event. The air itself seemed to carry a new sense of calm, a reflection of the discipline embodied by the guards. Liam stopped for a moment near a fountain in the courtyard, its water sparkling in the sunlight. He stared at the ripples spreading across the surface and thought about the ripple effect of his actions. One small, careless choice, splashing a tiny amount of water, had caused tension, embarrassment, and a lesson that he would remember for years. The guard's calm authority had transformed what could have been a humorous or trivial moment into something meaningful and unforgettable. Liam felt a mixture of gratitude, humility, and awe. He replayed the guard's words in his mind. Every action here matters, whether it is small or large. The simplicity of the statement was powerful. Liam realized that it applied not only in the palace but in life itself. Small actions, even those that seem harmless or insignificant, can have a larger impact than one might imagine. The guard's patience and dignity had not only corrected his behavior, but had also given him an example of how to act with integrity and respect, even in situations that might tempt him to be careless. As Liam continued walking, he saw a few tourists quietly pointing toward the guard, whispering to each other. Some of them were sharing what they had just witnessed, explaining to their friends how a young tourist had splashed water, and how the guard had handled the situation with calm authority. There was admiration in their voices, a recognition of the discipline and patience that the guard had displayed. Liam felt a sense of pride mixed with humility, realizing that the lesson was not only for him, but had quietly influenced everyone around. Liam's thoughts wandered to the years of training the guard must have undergone. Standing perfectly still, maintaining focus for hours, and remaining composed under constant observation was no easy task. It required mental strength, self-control, and a deep sense of responsibility. Liam imagined the dedication it took to embody such discipline day after day, year after year, without complaint. The realization made him respect the guard even more. What had seemed like a rigid, unfeeling figure now appeared human, noble, and inspiring. As he walked further, Liam noticed other guards posted throughout the courtyard. They, too, remained focused and composed, their presence commanding respect without a single word. Liam realized that the entire palace staff shared the same quiet dedication, forming a living system of respect, discipline, and tradition. Each guard was not just performing a task, they were preserving the dignity of a place that held centuries of history. Liam felt a sense of awe at the thought that he had almost disrupted this delicate balance with a playful, careless act. The young tourist found a bench under a shaded archway and sat down, taking a moment to collect his thoughts. He looked around at the crowd, noticing subtle gestures of reflection and respect. Tourists were now observing the guards with newfound seriousness, taking care not to cross invisible boundaries. Liam realized that the earlier incident had become a silent lesson for the entire crowd, a reminder of the importance of mindfulness and respect in public spaces. He felt a sense of connection with everyone there, as if they were all participants in a shared moment of understanding. Liam thought about his friends and family, imagining how he would recount the story later. but he knew he would not tell it as a funny prank. Instead, he would share the lesson he had learned, that even small, seemingly harmless actions can have meaningful consequences. That respect for tradition, discipline, and authority is essential in certain places. That humility and reflection are sometimes more valuable than amusement or attention. The memory of the guard's calm, unwavering presence would serve as the centerpiece of this story, a symbol of the dignity he had witnessed firsthand. Time seemed to move slowly as Liam sat on the bench, lost in thought. He observed the guard he had splashed earlier, now standing motionless again, perfectly composed. There was no trace of resentment, only a quiet commitment to duty. Liam admired the strength it must take to maintain such composure in the face of any provocation. It was a lesson not easily forgotten, a living example of self-discipline and integrity that transcended words. Liam's reflection deepened. He realized that the incident had also taught him patience. In the rush of excitement and playfulness, he had acted impulsively, without considering the consequences. Now, sitting quietly, he understood the value of pausing, observing, and thinking before acting. The palace and the guards had shown him the importance of mindfulness, an awareness of how one's actions can influence others and the environment around them. He also thought about courage. Not the kind of courage displayed in loud, dramatic acts, but the quiet courage required to remain steadfast and composed, to uphold one's responsibility even when provoked or distracted. The guard had displayed this courage effortlessly, without a single outward sign of struggle. Liam felt inspired by this, realizing that true strength often lies in calmness, patience, and consistency rather than in force or noise. As the day wore on, Liam noticed that the palace grounds seemed different now. What had once appeared as a busy, bustling tourist site now felt sacred, filled with a sense of reverence and history. Every corner, every archway, every polished stone seemed to carry stories of the past. The guards, previously seen as statuesque figures, were now symbols of continuity and dedication. Liam felt humbled to witness it, aware that his brief interaction had highlighted both his own limitations and the power of respect. At one point, a small group of children passed by, giggling softly as they tiptoed near the fountain. Their parents watched closely, reminding them gently to be careful and polite. Liam smiled quietly, recognizing the lessons extending beyond himself. The presence of the guards, their calm demeanor, and the earlier incident had become an unspoken teaching moment for everyone around. Even without saying a word, the guard had influenced the behavior and mindset of those present. Liam took a deep breath and stood up, feeling lighter but more aware. He walked slowly toward the exit of the courtyard, pausing occasionally to look back at the guards. Their disciplined presence seemed to radiate a quiet energy, a reminder that order, respect, and patience could speak louder than words. Liam understood that he would carry this memory with him forever, a lesson in humility, mindfulness, and the power of quiet authority. As he left the main area, Liam thought about how different his perspective had become. He realized that experiences like these were rare and valuable, moments that could shape character and understanding in ways that ordinary lessons could not. He felt grateful for the encounter, even though it had begun with a playful, thoughtless act. The guard's response had transformed it into something meaningful, something he would reflect on for years to come. By the time Liam exited the palace grounds, he felt a deep sense of respect and reflection. He knew that this day had changed him, not just in understanding how to behave in a place of tradition, but in recognizing the broader values of patience, humility, and mindful action. He felt as if he had learned not only about the guards or the palace, but also about himself, about how small actions could have unexpected significance, and how respect and dignity could leave a lasting impression. Even as he stepped onto the street outside, the memory of the guard's calm presence remained with him. He knew that he would never again underestimate the quiet strength of discipline or the subtle but powerful authority of respect. The incident, brief as it was, had become a defining moment in his understanding of responsibility, tradition, and personal growth. Liam looked back at the palace one last time, feeling a mixture of gratitude, awe, and humility. He had arrived full of curiosity and playfulness, but he was leaving with a new perspective, one shaped by reflection, respect, and the quiet, powerful lessons of a single guard who had taught more through presence than words ever could. He smiled softly to himself, knowing that this experience would remain etched in his memory, a reminder of the importance of respect, patience, and mindfulness in every action he took. Liam walked slowly away from the palace courtyard, his footsteps echoing lightly on the stone pathways. Each step seemed to remind him of the lesson he had just learned. The morning sunlight had softened into a gentle afternoon glow, casting long shadows across the grand building and highlighting the details of its ornate architecture. For the first time, Liam truly noticed the depth of history in every corner, the care taken to preserve each archway, each carved stone, and each polished surface. It was as if the palace itself was alive, speaking silently to those who took the time to observe. As he continued down the pathway, he glanced back at the guards still stationed at their posts. They remained motionless, their expressions calm and composed as if nothing had ever happened. But Liam knew better now. He knew that every step they took, every pause in their movement, and every silent gaze carried meaning. These guards were more than symbols of tradition. They were teachers of discipline, patience, and respect, even without uttering a single word. The realization filled him with both awe and humility. Liam found a quiet spot near the edge of the palace gardens. He sat on a low stone wall, letting his mind replay the morning's events. The memory of splashing water on the guard's uniform still made him wince slightly, but it was no longer accompanied by guilt alone. Now it was mixed with understanding. He understood why the guard had responded the way he did, and why the response had mattered so much, not just for him but for everyone around. It had been a lesson in consequences, but also in grace, patience, and the power of calm authority. He thought about the words the guard had spoken. Every action here matters, whether it is small or large. Those words repeated in his mind, echoing louder than any laughter or excitement he had felt earlier. Liam realized that they were not just about behavior in a palace, they were about life itself. Every choice, every action, even those that seem insignificant, carries weight. He had seen that firsthand. A single playful splash had shifted the energy of an entire courtyard, influenced the behavior of tourists around him, and left a lasting impression on himself. The courtyard had seemed chaotic at first, filled with laughter, chatter, and movement, but now Liam understood that the seeming chaos had order beneath it, a structure upheld not by rules alone, but by the discipline and presence of the guards. Their silent authority created an environment where respect and tradition could flourish. He realized how easily he had disrupted that balance and how important it was to honor such spaces. Liam's thoughts turned to the other tourists who had witnessed the incident. Many of them had been shocked, some whispered among themselves and others watched quietly, learning alongside him. Even without words, the guard had influenced the entire crowd. Liam smiled softly, thinking about the ripple effect of one person's calm, disciplined response. It reminded him that influence does not always need to be loud or forceful. Sometimes, the quietest actions, the ones rooted in patience and consistency, have the most profound impact. As he sat there, Liam felt a sense of gratitude growing inside him. He had arrived at the palace full of excitement and curiosity, eager to capture fun moments on video. He had expected adventure and amusement, but instead, he had received something far more valuable, a lesson in humility, self-awareness, and respect. He understood now that experiences like this were rare, moments that could shape character and perception in ways nothing else could. Looking around, Liam noticed the children playing gently in the gardens, the families walking slowly along the stone paths, and the tourists observing quietly. The atmosphere was calmer than before, more reflective, as if everyone had absorbed a part of the lesson without needing to speak about it. Liam realized that he was not alone in his transformation. The palace, the guards, and the shared experience had left an imprint on everyone who had been present that day. The young tourist reflected on his own actions and how easily he had acted without thinking. It was a humbling realization. He had laughed, thinking the act of splashing water would be funny and harmless, yet it had disrupted the quiet dignity of the place. The guard had not yelled, scolded, or punished him harshly. Instead, the man had simply stood firm, spoken calmly, and demonstrated the value of discipline and respect. Liam realized that true authority and influence come not from force, but from presence, patience, and wisdom. He thought about how he could carry this lesson forward in his own life. The guard's calm, measured response was a reminder that patience and composure are powerful tools. Liam understood that mischief or impulsive behavior might bring short-term amusement, but it often comes with consequences that must be faced thoughtfully. The experience had taught him to pause, reflect, and consider the broader effects of his actions. It was a lesson in personal growth as much as it was a lesson in respect for tradition. Liam rose from the stone wall and walked toward the exit of the gardens, taking one last look at the palace. He noticed every detail, the glint of sunlight on polished surfaces, the perfectly aligned uniforms of the guards, and the quiet, deliberate movements of those who maintained the grounds. Everything seemed connected, forming a living tapestry of history, discipline, and care. He felt honored to have witnessed it, humbled by the responsibility represented in every stance, every gesture, and every silent moment. He paused briefly near the main gate, watching the guard he had splashed. The man remained steady and composed, as if nothing had occurred. Yet Liam knew better. He knew the depth of the lesson that had just been taught, not through anger, but through calm presence. The guard's influence extended far beyond the courtyard, shaping the behavior of tourists, children, and anyone who took the time to observe. Liam realized that he had been given a rare opportunity to witness quiet leadership in its purest form. The memory of the guard's words stayed with him as he walked toward the street outside the palace. Every action here matters, whether it is small or large. Liam repeated it to himself, letting it sink deeper. It was a truth that transcended the palace walls. Whether in a place of history, a classroom, a workplace, or in everyday interactions, every choice carried weight. He understood that his actions could influence others, sometimes in ways he might not even realize. The lesson was simple, yet profound. Respect, mindfulness, and composure matter in all things. As Liam stepped out into the open street, he felt a sense of calm that had been absent earlier. His earlier excitement and impulsive energy had been replaced with thoughtfulness and awareness. He smiled softly, realizing that the experience had changed him, shaping his understanding of respect, responsibility, and human dignity. It was a lesson he would carry for a lifetime, one that would influence his actions, his interactions, and his perspective on the world. Even as he moved further away from the palace, the memory of the guard remained vivid. Liam could picture the man standing perfectly still, his expression calm and focused, his presence commanding respect without a single harsh word. It was a powerful reminder that authority is not about force or intimidation, but about discipline, patience, and quiet consistency. Liam understood that the true strength of character is often invisible, revealed only through calm, deliberate action, and unwavering commitment to responsibility. Liam took a deep breath and looked at the sky, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun. He realized that the encounter had taught him something far more valuable than he could have imagined. It had taught him humility, the importance of reflection, and the power of respect. He felt grateful for the moment, understanding that even a brief incident could leave a lasting impact when approached with awareness and care. As he walked away from the palace, he thought about how he would share this experience with others, not as a story of mischief, but as a story of learning, growth, and respect. He wanted his friends to understand the importance of mindfulness and the value of observing discipline and tradition. He wanted to convey how sometimes the quietest lessons are the most powerful, and how one encounter can shape understanding and character in meaningful ways. The palace behind him seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, not just as a building of stone and gold, but as a living reminder of history, tradition, and human dignity. Liam felt a sense of connection with it, and with the people who dedicated their lives to preserving its values. He understood that the guards were not merely figures of ceremony, but living symbols of patience, commitment, and respect, qualities that could teach anyone at any time if they were willing to observe and learn. By the time Liam reached the edge of the city, he felt transformed. The playful curiosity that had led him to splash water earlier had evolved into a deep understanding of respect and mindfulness. The guard's calm authority, the palace's history, and the silent lessons he had absorbed would remain with him forever. He knew that he would carry this memory, this experience, and this lesson with him in all aspects of life, shaping how he interacted with others and approached every action. As Liam disappeared into the busy streets, he glanced back one last time at the palace. The guards stood in their places, unwavering and dignified, a quiet testament to the values they embodied. Liam smiled softly, filled with gratitude, respect, and reflection. The incident, which had begun as a moment of mischief, had become a turning point in his understanding of discipline, patience, and respect. It was a day he would never forget, a day that had changed him, not through force or fear, but through calm authority, wisdom, and quiet example. And as the palace faded behind him, Liam carried with him a newfound understanding that true lessons are often found in stillness, observation, and respect, and that even small actions can leave a lasting impact on both the world and oneself.